Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another Set 19 Fighters Ambition deck profile. In today's video, I'm going to share with you guys my list for extra card green Broly. This is definitely one of the more interesting green decks we've gotten in quite some time. It seems like green's just the color of gimmicks nowadays, but regardless, this deck is pretty cool, especially in like a slower oriented format. Maybe not so much in a fast-paced aggressive format like we might kind of still be in. I guess Nationals will kind of tell us if we're in a super fast or even more slow and mid-range control meta. But this deck is cool against blue decks in particular and other green decks, I guess. But yeah, we'll go over in today's video. If you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And if you guys want to support the channel, there are tons of ways to do so down in the description. But today, guys, if you want to buy or pre-order any cards we talk about in today's video, or any training cards for that matter, it does really help me out if you were to use my link to TCG Player. Anyways, let's go right into the profile. So we have the leader. On the Unawakened side, you pitch a card, look at the top 7, put 2 extras under your leader. I really wish it didn't have the discard cost. I know that's kind of like a counterbalance because, you know, quote unquote, every card under your leader is a card in your hand, so you're generally drawing 2. You can look at it that way, but I mean, you're still playing with such a low hand size that charging can actually be quite difficult in this deck, and that actually plays a role in how I've constructed the main deck, but we'll talk about that more later. Then you can awaken when you have 5 or more extras under your leader and 2 or more energy. You do not go down to a certain life total, so that can be both advantageous and also a negative feature, kind of depending on the matchup. Like if you really want to get to lower life to maybe increase your hand size a bit, maybe start using your super combos and you're up against a control deck, that can suck a little bit. There are cards we can play to help manage that issue, which we'll talk about later, but it's also really good against the red decks because, you know, you want to stay at a higher life. Sometimes when you awaken and go to 6 with some of these other leaders, it's almost like you're doing a damage for the red player, and you obviously want to avoid that if possible. Now, the awakened side of the leader is actually really strong. When you attack, you draw a card, and then you can put an extra under your leader, and then you can make a Z energy. So this deck is actually one of the very few green decks that's good at making Z energy. That's a really nice upside. Then the activate main, you can take an extra from your hand and put it under your leader, and then your opponent pitches 1 card. Now that you truly can just look at that as like, I'm taking a card from my hand and putting it into my other hand, and my opponent's just pitching 1 for free. So that is pretty good. And then you can combo with the extra cards under your leader thanks to this leader's activate battle. So it is a way of, you know, kind of mitigating the issue of being a deck full of extra cards. I mean, that is still a problem in some ways, but that effect tries to help mitigate that. Now let's go into the main board here. We have 3 copies of SS Broly Full Power Frenzy. This is a pretty cheap play in this deck, especially considering our Z leader can play it for 1. It offers removal, it offers us triple strike threat, and it has the ability to take some of the extras from under our leader, put it under itself, and that will also serve as a way of protecting the card. I guess, like, you know, 1 removal per game usually, depending on how many extra cards you can stack under it. But yeah, good threat, cheap threat. I do like a lot when I can play it for 1 as opposed to playing it for 2, but it kind of depends, you know, what state of the game you're in. 4 copies of Broly Bestial Rage. I really don't like this card, but I feel like you have to play it. It helps make Z energy, helps deal with early threats. It is a 25k beater, I guess. It draws you a card, but I don't know. I just don't have much else to do on turn 2. Maybe you can just keep that energy open for defense if you don't want to tap out on 2, but yeah, it feels like you kind of have to play this card, even though I don't love it, but there's some other Brolys in the deck that we can play for sure. Then we have Chilai's Aid, which is essentially our deck Senzu Bean. Definitely a very nice addition to the deck. One of the extras we can use under our leader because they all share a permanent that says they can be used under the leader as if they were in your hand. So really good card. And you know, more and more decks and archetypes are getting Senzu Bean types of effects. And it's funny because Senzu Bean just got errated into a much lesser state than it was, and now every color is kind of getting this, you know, more or less defensive Senzu Bean-esque type card. Then we have Wishing to End the Battle. So both this deck and the Green Gogeta BR deck got their own forms of, I guess you can compare them to Dormant. Even though they function a little bit differently than Dormant, you negate the first attack, and under a certain condition, your opponent can only attack 2 more times for the turn. So they technically get 3 attacks, one of which is negated though, so of course you're not dealing with that one, but you do have to deal with the next 2 attacks, which of course Homicidal Clones, we'll see later, is in this deck, can help with that very much so. But your leader has to be the Z leader in order to use this card's effect, which makes it all that much more important to get to your Z leader, which kind of sucks in some aspects because, again, I think the Awakened leader is actually very strong, making your opponent pitch cards, creating Z energy. I think your Awakened leader is very good for that, and sometimes when you have to go to your Z leader, you lose out on some of those aspects, which is unfortunate. But if you need the Nimbus type effect, you do want to try to go to your Z leader if possible. Then we have Training with Ba. I love this card. Negate an attack, make a Z energy. That's a really cool type of card. Honestly, I kind of hope more colors and more decks get this. Maybe just leave it for green, man, because green really needs ways of making Z energy without losing value. So yeah, really cool type of card. Big fan. Out of Control Power. This is potentially a board wipe. It kind of depends on what your board state is and what your opponent's board state is. I oftentimes find this card being a bit more dead than anything else. It is one of your more decent answers to the red aggro strategies, but sometimes against those decks, even paying 1 for this is a bit too costly. Like, especially if you have to start your turn using, you know, Wishing to End the Battle or Training with Ba, and then dedicating another energy to another extra card is sometimes a big ask, but it can be okay in those red matchups for helping clear the board. True Power Awaken. This card is really cool. So this card is able to tax your opponent for any activate main type skills. Now keep in mind, that is not only taxing the activate main skills in orange on your opponent's cards. There are keywords that are also activate mains, like for example all the Union skills, Union Fusion, Union Absorb, Union Patara. Those are all activate main skills. I think Overwhelm is even one of them. Like, all these types of keyword skills that are used at basically activate main speed, True Power Awaken does tax those, which is pretty cool. It's very matchup dependent, but it can be a very good card. Basically, your opponent, their turn becomes overcosted, or they just pitch 2 cards for your 1 energy. Yeah, really cool card. Big fan of this type of design. Then, of course, we have the 4 copies of the Paragus Super Combo, just the best super combo you can play in a deck like this. And then we have 4 copies of Paragus Issuing Orders. Now, this is one thing about the deck I don't love, because we're also playing 4 copies of Cunning Murder. You kind of like have to play these cards if you want to awaken by turn 2, because otherwise you're not able to get 5 extras under your leader until turn 3 typically. Maybe this can just be cut from the deck altogether, and then you can just try to awaken turn 3. But I mean, at that point, you're pitching 3 cards throughout the game. That's really going to put a big hindrance on your hand size. I really do want to get to my awaken side by turn 2, and this combo allows us to do that. The reason I don't like it is because you're looking for a 2-card combo on turn 1, and yes, your leader can search for half that combo, meaning you can search for Cunning Murder, but there's not really another great Paragus to play. Unfortunately, Cunning Murder negates the Paragus' skills and then removes it from the field, which would have been really cool on one of the older Paragus cards. It's got an effect something along the lines of, like, if it's removed from the field by a skill, you untap an energy, and then it looks top 5 for a Broly when you play it. Now, I don't think there's enough Brolys in the deck to really make that a great 1-drop. I think there's like 11 Brolys in the deck, which is not a great amount of search targets. And the fact that Cunning Murder negates that skill makes me not want to play that Paragus. There's just no other great 1-drop Paragus to play in the deck, and Cunning Murder specifically requires you know, 1-drop Paragus. So yeah, this is the only like kind of unfortunate thing about the deck, that it kind of relies on this combo, but it's somewhat hard to pull off turn 1. But I mean, it is just part of the gimmick of the deck. Then for the SCR, I am choosing to play the yellow Bardock SCR. Even with the reveal of Cell Max, I still like this SCR the most, because I don't know, Cell Max is kind of weird. Without really having many ways to remove it during your own turn, you can't get the board wipe necessarily on command. And I will say, in longer games, you don't spend a ton of energy in this deck offensively, so you can pay 3 for the Bardock, you know, remove some stuff on your opponent's board, and then you're still floodgating your opponent on their turn, so that 3 energy does pay off on both players' turns. So I still like this SCR for a lot of green sand decks. I don't know, I'll have to just try Cell Max some more to see if I like it. I do like the fact that it's a 1-drop 40k quad strike threat. That is really cool. Maybe that's relevant in like some clapback scenarios, but yeah, this SCR still been working well for me. 1 copy of Dark Broly Heartless Berserker, of course, is the one of Overwhelm that pretty much every deck plays. 3 copies of Homicidal Clones, one of the very few extra cards you don't want to toss under your leader. You want to have this card in your hand if you can help it. And then 1 copy of Broly Limits Transcended. Now, our Z leader can play this for 1 energy, and it is a way to get some barrier removal while also getting a big 35k double strike threat on the board. And what's cool too is your opponent cannot counter with counters that cost 2 or more. So your opponent can't block or negate. Your opponent can't use certain types of floodgates when this card attacks specifically. I'd probably side deck more copies of this for controlling matchups like that rely on Ready to Rumble or Gohan Baby's Minion, or you know, other types of control decks like that. This card has a very cool use case in those matchups. Then we have 3 copies of SS Broly Villainous Threat. So kind of like our mid-game Broly threat. You can play it for 2. It's got dual attack. You can KO a battle card upon attacking twice. This card is pretty decent, you know, as again like a mid-game type of threat. 2 copies of Gohan Latent Power Unleashed. So these last few cards are really just tech slots. This is really for your blue matchups. You'll notice in a second that I am playing Goku Fated Rivals, and I'm not playing Piccolo Fated Rivals. That's not what this last card is. The reason for that, the reason I'm not playing Piccolo Fated Rivals, is it's very, very difficult to hold on to 2-card combos in this deck, because you know you're playing with a very low hand size. A lot of times when I was playing Piccolo Fated Rivals on my build, it would come down to me having to charge one of the 2 Fated Rivals, and then, you know, if I do that, I can't use the other, which is you know, kind of unfortunate. So I'm playing Goku Fated Rivals for the pure 2 energy barrier removal, and I'm playing Gohan Latent Power for the pure unison marker removal. The cool thing about Latent Power is that you know, let's say you attack with your 15k leader at a Buu unison, you combo this, that brings your leader to 20k, so you're taking 1 marker off by damage, and then you're taking another 3 markers off by this card's skill. So again, this is tech. You don't have to main it, especially if your locals is like not blue focused. You can maybe make your deck a bit more defensive for red matchups, but I am choosing to play it here. And again, Fated Rivals Goku just for the barrier removal. 3 copies of Cooler Effortless Strike, a very cool card you can play in this deck because you are so extra card based. You want to be counterplaying mostly in the Sin matchup. You can also do some cool things where you counterplay in the Red Gogeta matchup, depending on if they play cards by skills or not. You can definitely you know, put them in a bad bind where they're not able to rely on their you know, for less of a better term, Pot of Greed battle cards. So yeah, it can be useful there, but it's very, very good in the Sin matchup because they play a lot of 4 cost and less without deflect. So that is really good. That's the main board. Let's go over to the Z deck real quick. We have the 1 copy of Surmounting, of course, for when you need to get yourself a little bit lower in life. The 1 copy of Frieza Resurrected Ambition with all your high cost green battle cards attacking. If you have energy to play this, you can make your opponent pitch a card while still producing a 15k threat. Then we have 2 copies of Lemo Dependable Friend. This probably doesn't need to be at 2, I don't think. I usually only play 1 per game if I even ever play it, but at least, like, if it sticks around, you get to reduce the cost of your extra cards by 1 every turn, and if your leader, if your opponent removes it, you get rewarded for that. So this is a pretty cool type of Z card, I'd say. Then we have the 1 Z Leader. So yeah, you're going to be on this a lot of games because, again, you want to be able to use your certain cards that require it. But it just has a lot less utility than the regular Awakened Leader, which I don't love. But yeah, again, you have the ability to play your 8 cost for 1. You do have the ability to swing your 25k. And this is one of the ways you can stack your battle cards with more extra cards if you want your 8-drop Broly to, you know, survive a bit more. And then you can place 1 green extra card from under any Broly and essentially combo with it. So that is one upside from the regular leader as well. But again, they just have like different ups and downs, and I do like the regular Awakened Leader a lot more, but the Z Leader here is still solid. And then we have 2 copies of Jiren the Immovable. So now that we have a Z Leader that can actually make Z Energy pretty well, or sorry, I guess a regular leader can do it, cards like this are pretty decent, where you can, you know, use those Z Energy to remove markers off of Unison. Like, if you wanted to one-shot a Buu, you would need a total of 6 Z Energy, which is probably still a lot for this deck, so you might be using this on smaller cost unisons and whatnot, but still a solid green Z battle card. And then just down to the side deck, 1 card I was talking about for helping, you know, maintain control of your life total, Broly Unrealized Ambition. When you play it, you take 2 cards from your life to your hand. So this can be very good in those control matchups that are just never attacking you. You do want to be careful though. Like, a lot of times I'll play this and I'll combo it off so I don't have to take more life if my opponent removes it. Again, like, if your opponent's just not attacking you at all, maybe you want them to remove it and maybe you want to take that extra life. But yeah, a lot of times I'll combo it to Z Energy just so I don't have to deal with that secondary auto. But overall, guys, that's the deck in its entirety. I know that there's a lot of different ways you can build this deck, and I definitely want to know in the comments below how you're building it, what you would change about my build. I would even like to get this down to 52 cards, so if you have any suggestions for that, drop it in the comments. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.